So I finally made it to the Maritimes. I passed most of the way through New Brunswick, making a stop in Fredericton to try and panhandle a little, and then in Oromocto, in which I had to walk about 5 or 6 kilometers to the split in the highway towards St. John. And in St. John, quite a lot happened, so stick through to the end to hear about the police, the hospital, and the crime scene on the side of the road. When I got to St. John, I started to explore around the city. I went to Tin Can Beach, in which I saw the East Coast for the very first time, and then I walked around seeing all these old architecture and buildings throughout downtown, and then I went down to this container village which had a bunch of shops and some restaurants, in which I got this veggie burger for lunch. But unfortunately, as I was walking around, I didn't have my flip-flops on and I got a massive splinter in the bottom of my foot. So the next thing I had to do was rush myself over to the hospital. Luckily, on the way to the hospital, I ran into some police. So I asked them if they could take me the rest of the way. They said yeah, and they patted me down and put me in the back of the cruiser, in which they asked my name. And I told them I was Brandon, and they asked my last name. So I asked if I was under arrest or if I was being detained, and they said no, and this went back and forth for a little while. But they ended up kicking me out of the car and saying, "We're not going to play these games. If you don't want to communicate with us, we're not going to drive you." So I asked them where the hospital was, and they gave me some vague directions, up this street, up that street. They wouldn't tell me the address, and eventually, in a very snarky way to say it politely, they drove off and abandoned me. Luckily though, when I finally got to the hospital, there wasn't a lot of people there, so I got in right away. And after my minor surgery, I looked behind me when I was leaving and I noticed I was leaving. So apparently I'm leaving the hospital, leaving a trail from my foot. But I guess that's okay because I'm finished already. Although it's not what it looks like. It is actually just some iodine that they use to clean the wound. On the way out of the hospital, I happened to walk upon a crime scene that had just taken place down from a little homeless encampment that the city had set up. And unfortunately, that's going to bring me to my adaptation of this place. It is a beautiful city with all of its old architecture and its wonderful history and being on the water. However, it's not necessarily the safest or most wholesome place. The homelessness is running rampant and the police are not the kindest. Although I guess that could be said about any place. So back to this crime scene. It happened on the other side of a street from an apartment building that the police were currently investigating / raiding, and the police officer that was taking the blood sample, of course, he wasn't able to tell me anything about it. So I decided to just give him some space and take the long way around and continue on my way. I ended up having to take a hotel for a few days, or what turned out to be a homestay, because it was about to start raining pretty hard and I have this new injury on my foot, which I thought would be good to stay off of, and they told me not to get it wet. So I ended up spending 3 nights in this homestay, which was actually pretty decent and well priced. However, now I'm really getting low on money, so I'm glad to move forward from this adventure in St. John and finally make it to Nova Scotia.